Okay, so it's Monday lunchtime, and we're just starting to get wind since the game yesterday against Brighton in the FA Cup, which we lost, that Michael Carrick will be taking the interim role at Manchester United. So it sounds like he's now the front runner ahead of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, something we did predict last week, I think, Ash. So yeah, just jumping on, I want to get some initial reaction to this news.
I think it's the right call. It looks like it was a straight shootout between Carrick and Ollie. My gut feeling in terms of when I first heard that it's probably going to be one of them two, I did think Michael Carrick is the right interim solution for now, mainly because also if he does a good job, I mean, I wouldn't give him the job in the summer, but if he did a good job, he's in contention to be, in that kind of like shortlist for the summer. So I do think they've actually gone the right route. What about yourself?
Yeah, so like on the main pod we did last week, I obviously said I'd like a combination of probably Ollie and Carrick to take the role, but then having reflected on it, maybe like 24, 48 hours later, you can vouch for this. I said, actually thinking about it, I think Carrick is the right appointment, given that obviously Ollie had 2+ years at United and, he had a good crack at it. So it'd feel like you're going backward slightly to give it to Ollie. Whereas Carrick, obviously, he did manage interim a couple of games when Ollie got sacked, but he's not had a proper crack at it. So for him to have 4 or 5 months, it feels like something new, something different. And I personally think slightly less embarrassing for Ineos to give it to
Yeah,
Carrick instead of Ollie.
definitely.
So yeah, I mean, obviously this isn't confirmed. It's looking this way. The interesting part will be also the coaching team that Carrick works with, because obviously Fletcher has led the first team for the last 2 matches. So it sounds like Fletcher will stick around with the first team. That's like the early talk. And I have seen reports also of possibly Carrick bringing in Jonathan Woodgate, who worked with Carrick at Middlesbrough. And I was also hearing that Carrick's brother worked with him at Middlesbrough. So I don't know if he's going to try and bring any of those guys in. But what do you feel about the coaching setup?
Yeah, I think all of a sudden United fans are going to become Middlesbrough experts for his period at Middlesbrough. So yeah, you're right. I didn't even know his brother was with him at Borough. I think, look, nothing is going to be like the optimum solution at this point. So Darren Fletcher's staying. I know it's only 2 games, but I do like what Fletcher's been saying, like whether it's about Shesko, the team. I think he even made a comment like it was easy to go back to a back four and things like that. So if it means he's going to be able to learn, because obviously Carrick did coach under Ollie, so it's not like it's just 2 games that he had as a permanent. There's multiple years of coaching with Ollie alongside Kieran McKenna back then. I heard, yeah, potentially Johnny Evans. So it does feel like a bit Liverpool boot room from the 90s. But I think the main thing is to just get the team playing to a level where it's competent. So not amazing, just competent. And obviously, I think that's something that at least Carrick's had the experience of the last 2-3 years at Middlesbrough in terms of he's managed championship level. It's a gritty league and, game after game. And obviously he had the pressure of trying to get into the Premier League via the playoffs. So wasn't successful, but he had good runs. So yeah, I mean, it's damage limitation almost. So that,
Yeah.
that's the thing that they're going to have to navigate. What's your thoughts on like not giving it to Ollie?
Yeah, like I said, I think to go back to Ollie is just, yeah, it feels like a backward step, because obviously we've been down that route, and it was nearly like 4.5 years ago, I think. So a long time. So I'm sure Ollie will be disappointed, but I'm sure he appreciates that it's fair enough for Carrick to get a chance at it. So it's not like I feel sorry for Ollie. And as we discussed, I think from the club's perspective, it probably is the right call. However, I wouldn't mind some type of consultant role for Ollie to work with Wilcox, because these guys clearly don't know what they're doing. But we'll touch on that on the main pod. But going back to the Ollie point, I think he'll get over it. I think he'll go back to his nice house in Norway, which United's compensation helped paid for, and he'll watch and support Carrick, I'm sure. So not too disappointed for him. What about you?
Yeah, like in terms of Ollie, like he had his chance. He gave it a good run. I do think also, yeah, that if I was working for Ineos, I think that angle of it, like they wouldn't be looking to do it because optically it doesn't look good. Whereas with Carrick, there's an opportunity. Like I said, if he put like an amazing run together, it will look good on Ineos essentially, right? And that's what they're hoping to get out of this.
Yeah, it's true. Like if he does have a good end to the season, I mean, let's say we finish in the top four. Obviously, top five probably gets us Champions League, but let's say it's top four. You'd think
What about
that.
winning a trophy?
Well, we can't now, can we?
Check it.
Yeah. So again, we'll touch on that on the main pod. But like, even if we were to finish in the top four from this point, we'd say that's a good end to the season.
Yeah.
But I do think the club will learn from. You can call it a mistake of giving Ollie the perm job. Some will say it wasn't a mistake because he finished second and third. But having gone down that route before, I really don't see Carrick getting it long term unless he pulls off some miracle and finishes third or second, and then it becomes a viable option. But I don't really see that because I want to express my concerns with it now. As much as I love Carrick, you know how much I loved Carrick as a player as well. The lack of experience does concern me because if you're talking Carrick, you're talking Fletcher, if you're talking Johnny Evans, Jonathan Woodgate, Carrick's brother, I would like to see some experience. I'm not going to say Mick Phelan, but possibly like a Rennie Mullenstein. I don't know, like some experience on the coaching side would give me a little bit more comfort. Would you agree with that? Or do you think he needs his own people?
No, I think given it's an interim gig, he should have someone in there who knows about Premier League football. This is the thing. Rennie Mullenstein, from what I remember, hasn't been involved in Premier League football for quite a while. So, like, he's got great experience, obviously. But
he's been doing a lot of podcasts over the last year. That's probably why he's on my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I think his last stint was probably at Fulham, right? But I can't remember how long ago that was. It was definitely a few years ago. But yeah, I can't give you a name off the top of my head in terms of a coach that could be involved, but like someone who's basically been coaching, part of backroom staff in the last like couple of years, that would be very, very handy because obviously, yeah, you got people like Fletcher and Carrick who know the club, but it's a tough league as we already seen, right? I think we've won 3 games out of the last 11, I think it is. So we need to get back to winning ways. That doesn't mean winning every game, but like we've got to be winning more, especially against these teams that we've dropped points, over the last like 6-7 games in the league. So yeah, definitely go with someone who knows the league recently, as opposed to Mick Phelan or Rennie Mullenstein.
Yeah. If it is Carrick, it's going to be an interesting start to his managerial career because he's got the Manchester derby this Saturday and then it's Arsenal away next week. So what a start in terms of games.
Yep, the English Pep Guardiola, he's going to get ready for the biggest game of his life on Saturday. Yeah, the atmosphere will be incredible, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean that's the good thing, right? Like he'll get so much support, it's going to be unreal. And I think that's the nice thing about it. Like, also just thinking about it off the top of my head, like, even for Ineos, optically with the mainstream media, if for some reason it didn't go well, they've got more of an out with Carrick as opposed to Ollie, because if they picked Ollie and it went disastrous, they'll be like, well, why did you pick someone, where it ended terribly?
Yeah.
Whereas with Carrick, I think the media will be a bit more friendly. I think even him being English alone just helps a little bit with all that stuff. I mean, it shouldn't be the driver. The main reason is that he's best equipped, especially, in 2025 or 2026 even now, sorry, to be coaching because, like, he's had the most, as you said, recent experience. I know Ollie was at Besiktas, but that didn't last that long, did it?
Yeah, so let's be honest, in terms of Ineos, like you say, optically, I think Carrick works, but also it gives them a little bit of breathing room because it is going to be an appointment that's popular with the fan base. And we've seen over the last week the scrutiny that is currently on Wilcox, Barada, Ratcliffe. And this type of appointment, I guess, gives them a little bit more cover than some other random interim appointment because there's obviously an affinity with Carrick. So that's definitely in their thinking, I think.
I think that's the only thing I am interested in, that Ineos like to think that they're more clever than everyone else. And obviously they've got like data from like Nice and the Swiss team that they own in terms of like other candidates. And yeah, it was interesting, obviously, that they went with a united person as opposed to potentially like look around Europe. Like the only name I thought of where like they could have looked at, but I don't know even if he would be being up for like a 6 month gig is the ex Borussia Dortmund manager Edin Terzic, I think his name was. But you know, he got to the Champions League final, and you know, he's actually coached in the Premier League with Slaven Bilic. So you know, that would have been probably the only name that I can think of. But yeah, I mean, as we'll probably talk about in the main pod about what happened between Wilcox and Ruben, how it
Well, that if we
unravelled.
went for that type of appointment, that could have ended like a Ralph Rangnick.
Exactly. Yeah,
So I guess that's
yeah,
the risk. So
that's the risk.
yeah, I mean, we'll wait for the official announcement, which is expected, I think, early this week. So we'll obviously have a more in-depth reaction to this and a reaction to the FA Cup defeat against Brighton, which I was at and broke my boycott of Old Trafford because we couldn't sell the tickets.
Do we have to talk about it?
Unfortunately, yes. So yeah, I think it's going to be the least amount of games since 1904 or something like that. 40 games we're going to have this season because we got knocked out of the first round of the League Cup and the FA Cup. And even just to spice it up a little bit last night, Bruno Fernandes hacked on X as well and putting
Yeah,
all sorts of tweets out there, which was quite entertaining, to be honest. So we'll talk
very
about that.
topical tweets.
Yep, exactly. And in fact, he did slag off Ineos as well, which I did enjoy.
Pretty
So
sure that one was real.
yeah, that's what they're saying. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there for now. And obviously we'll have more reaction on the main podcast, which will drop later this week.